Hello, it's Amy from Buttercake bringing you another tutorial. This is a Coquette style cake. I just love this trend right now. Very vintage, hyper feminine, very girly colors, lots of extra frills, and I added some chunky bows on top that I think really, was like the cherry on the sundae. Getting started with heart layers. This is a 6-inch heart, and I'm leveling the cake layers, stabilizing with my non-dominant hand, and then using a serrated blade, marking around the edges as I turn, making sure that that blade is very stable, keeping it at the same level, turning slowly and cutting deeper as I go to just get like a really nice level cake layer. I did that with all 3 of my heart cakes. This is some buttercream that I'm using to just attach the cake so it doesn't move around. Yes, that is an upside down pie plate because I ran out of cake boards. Don't judge me. I'm putting some simple syrup on here, and you guys, recipes will be down in the description, as well as links to everything that I kind of used in this video and tools that I used. Now this is my go-to Swiss Meringue Buttercream, and I didn't color it at this point. I'm just stacking the cake layers. So I added some here and I'm smoothing it out so that I can get a nice level cake. Here goes my next layer. I'm taking my time and looking down over top of the cake and just kind of giving a little spin to make sure that these are lined up. Heart cakes especially, you want to take some extra time to line them up correctly so that they are easier to apply your final coat and get it really smooth and level. Some more simple syrup, some more buttercream. Now you can add more buttercream between your cake layers if you like that. I think about a 1/4 inch of buttercream is more than enough to about 1 inch tall of a cake layer. It's a good ratio. Some people like more frosting though, some people like less. So that is totally up to you. Final layer, I'm putting the bottom crust upwards. That's totally preference, but it looks nicer when you cut into the cake. And you can simple syrup this outside crust. It will soak in, so don't worry about that. It might take a little bit longer, but it gets in there eventually. Applying the rest of my crumb coat here. So I like to pile it on the top and then basically smooth it out until it's very, very thin on the top, and then whatever's left over, I push down over the sides, and this kind of catches everything that came out between the layers. And so this way I can push around the buttercream that's currently on the cake, and I don't have to add a whole lot of extra. Because this is a crumb coat, anything that you put on at this point is going to have crumbs in it, and that's just a waste of buttercream to me. So I like to keep working with very, very little buttercream to get through this stage. Smoothing off the top edges here, very important. You don't want to leave those because once that buttercream gets firm in the fridge, it will be practically impossible to smooth down. So you want a good smooth base coat. 20 minutes in the fridge is all you really need to get it set before you can add your second coat. I added a little bit of pink gel color, just a couple drops to my buttercream to get this really beautiful pale pink. Piling it on the top to get a nice thick layer, and then taking large amounts of icing and adding it to the sides. It's okay to add a lot here, not a big deal. You're going to remove a lot when you scrape the cake. So don't freak out. There isn't this much icing on the cake when it's totally finished. You do want to be careful here if you're doing a heart shape around these, the top of the heart, basically because it's you want to make sure you're getting enough frosting on there so that it's easier to smooth it. It's easy to, like, when you're scraping it, to kind of take too much off, and then you lose that heart shape when you smooth it all out. So make sure you're adding enough icing to those rounded edges. Here I'm using a bench scraper. You can also use a cake scraper, or you can use a nice putty knife, whatever you have. I like this one because it's a good height and it gives me a 90-degree edge on the bottom, and there's no interference. I don't have a handle or anything that's going to get in the way of me connecting that scraper with the cake plate. So you get a nice clean angle there at the bottom of your cake. Just taking my time here removing, again, a good bit of that icing, scraping it off on the edge of my bowl there, and giving this a few passes. Right here in that dip is where it gets a little tricky, so, take your time, get it as smooth as you can. I'm adding some frosting just with my cake scraper as needed, and then going over it again, going pretty slow in that area just to get that nice shape. And it just takes a few passes to get the sides smooth, and then here I am taking off the top edges. I am not pushing down or applying any pressure. I am simply moving it across. You can see it bulged a little bit there, and that's what we don't want, because then you have to go and smooth your sides again. So very, very gentle touch here along this top edge, just barely taking the icing off so that we don't have to backtrack and re-smooth the sides at all. Getting all my edges here, and then you'll see that I do take time to kind of rotate the cake and look and see if I have any high points or low points, take off a little bit more frosting where I need. I can see one of those rounded areas of the heart is a little low, so I kind of take some icing off the other side just to even it out, get it pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect because there's going to be a lot of detail on this cake, but generally flat-ish top will do really, really well. Now, for the rest of the decoration, it's good to just pop your cake back in the fridge again to let it set up. Then it'll be easier to work with the cake. I'm using a Wilton one tip here. This icing isn't tinted. You can see it's a little off-white. So if you want super bright white, you're going to have to put in white food coloring. I'm okay with it being off-white. I don't mind at all. It gives it that more kind of vintage look. But these are like old school flowers. I used to draw these in my notebooks when I was in school. So I thought, why not? This might be fun. Very, very early 2000s sort of rose. I just thought it was a pretty style to look like lace. Coquette style is very feminine. Lots of lace, lots of ruffles. So flowers, that whole thing. And this is just like a pretty kind of organic rose shape. And I'm just filling in spaces here, creating a new center wherever I feel like, and then adding the petals as I go, slowly filling the top of the cake. Now, you can just leave a small border. You don't have to go all the way to the edge because there are going to be some borders along the top edge of this cake. Just adding some extra petals there just to fill out. And then I'm using a cookie cutter to create the layout for my swags. Just rolling it across the cake like that, lining it up, and just give it a little roll. This worked okay for me. I feel like I didn't really get a good lineup. Now there are specialty tools that you can do, but I probably just didn't take my time. I was in a hurry doing this part, so you could definitely fiddle with it more and get it a little bit better. There I went a little too high on that peak, so my buttercream is nice and firm. I'm just using the heat from my finger to smooth it out a little bit and clean up that imperfection so that they are better lined up. And then you'll see that one on the edge there, that one, I don't know what happened. There's one that's so high. I do fix it later though, so if that happens, just, it's okay. We just roll with it. There's a lot of details on this cake. It blends in. Piping the same design on that bottom section underneath where I marked with the cookie cutter, that whole area. Now this did take a little bit of time, so, keep that in mind. However, I enjoy this kind of piping. This is a lot of fun for me, just to sit and fiddle with all of this. I'm just filling in all of my gaps here. Again, you don't have to go all the way down to the bottom there because there's going to be borders. So just filling in with, a 1/2 inch clearance basically. Continuing this piping the whole way around, just starting new full roses wherever I have empty spaces, and then adding petals until they all sort of morph into one another, right up to that line that I marked. This is a number 4 round tip, and I'm just doing a circular motion right along that line that I marked to give like a cord style border. And I thought this was a really nice sort of swag look, sort of vintage cords, or something you'd see like on an old curtain, basically. I really liked how it turned out though. This is a Wilton 104, taking my time. This is a back and forth motion to get that ruffle. What I like about using this upside down pie plate is that it sort of gives it a little more room to kind of create a larger ruffle around the edges. On a flat board, it would limit it a little bit, but I feel like with this, it just created a much nicer ruffle there at the bottom. And I am leaving a gap there because there's going to be a shell border. I'm doing the same here on the top, and you can see how it kind of fills down that top edge of the cake a little bit. Really gorgeous. This is sped up, so I am going slow in real time just to get a nice ruffle there. Using a border tip here to do some shells. I will have all of the tips that I use down in the description too, so you'll be able to reference that. Of course, you can use any kind of tip you like. I'm just applying pressure, moving up, pulling down, stopping pressure, and pulling away. I like to start at the point of the heart. If I'm doing heart cakes, it just creates a much nicer finish. Piping around just the edge of that previous ruffle border, and then I like to do that one shell right there down at the tip, just so it gives like a much more crisp angle. This last one, I pull the tail down past the edge of the previous one and then cut it off, so it kind of, again, it gives it like a more of a point. Then I'm using 104 with just the plain white to create these roses, starting slightly above the points of that swag, so that when all of the rose petals are piped on, it just covers those edges, covers the points where they come together, so it gives it a really nice finished look. These are really a lot of fun to do. I like these. I go very slow with them, as you could see, creating the petals just so that it just gives it a really nice effect. Letting the pressure that I'm applying to the bag do a lot of the work. I move the tip a little bit, but a lot of it, again, is just the pressure. So there you go. You can see they all look a little bit different, but they all look really, really nice. I love how those turned out. Now I'm using a 352 leaf tip with a very, very pale green. I just used a tiny, tiny dot of leaf green color to get these. Doing one leaf right at the bottom edge of these. You could obviously add more leaves. You could add stems if you like, totally up to you. Now for the bows, this is a really pretty floral pink ribbon that I've just had, that I just felt so inspired by it to use it up. So I created a loop, and then this is one-sided ribbon. So you wrap it around that loop and then twist it in the back. And this is going to make sure that that pattern stays on the outside throughout the whole bow. So I'm creating kind of another loop and pushing it through that center ring. It's a little finicky. You might have to fiddle with it a little bit to get it through there, but once you do, you can see, there you go. You've got the one-sided pattern all on the outside. So I'm pulling those loops out just to cinch down the center, and then I pull the tails out gently to shorten the loops a little bit. I don't want them to be so big. I want longer tails. And then fluffing them out, just taking my time with this. You can use smaller ribbon or two-sided ribbon, so it's a little bit easier to work with. And a lot of the cakes I've seen, you know, they have smaller ribbons, but of all the research that I did looking at different photos of the actual Victorian Coquette style, bows were very, very large on dresses and things like that. Folding those ends in half and cutting on a diagonal gives you this nice notched look. I really like how that looks. Totally up to you though. You could also cut it just on a diagonal. Realizing there that they are not the same length. So I went back, cut a little bit more off to make it a little more symmetrical. Now I made 3 of these ribbons. This is a 6-inch heart, not a very large cake. So 3 of these large ribbons seemed like more than enough to me. If you're using smaller ribbons, go ahead and add more, or if you're doing a larger cake, totally up to you. You can use even wider ribbons, you know, really play around with it. I just thought these were a nice proportion to this particular size of cake. So I'm adding 3 around the top, evenly spaced, just like that. Oh, I love that. So, so cute. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, you guys. I appreciate it. If you're not already subscribed, please do consider subscribing. I post new tutorials every week of cakes, cookies, cupcakes, all the fun, sweet treats. If you like this cake, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thanks. Bye.